Hi, so welcome to the third and final part of the Retribution Paladin update for this latest build. This is going to be a more in-depth one just to catch up with all the latest changes. It's by no means finished. There's going to be more changes before this thing goes live, a lot more changes. Also, when you're looking at this, do check the date. If it looks like it was a while ago, do check that there's not a more up-to-date version of the update. These updates do go on, they're going to roll on as the alpha and the beta goes on. You can always look at my latest videos, or you can check the playlist that talks about Retribution in Legion Alpha and Beta. So, we still generate holy power and then spend it. We generate it with our Ashbringer, as well as Crusader Strike and the new ability, Blade of Justice. In addition, Blade of Justice and Crusader Strike have a 20% chance to proc Conviction. This causes our next holy power spender to only cost 2 holy power instead of 3. Note that all holy power spenders cost exactly 3 holy power now. No more, no fewer. Judgment no longer grants holy power, but instead places a debuff on the target that means they will take 30% plus your mastery damage from any holy power builder or spender that you use on it in that window. The cooldown of Judgment has been raised to 12 seconds, giving the debuff of 50% uptime if you had 0 haste. Haste, as usual though, does reduce the cooldown of Judgment, and so could be used to increase its percentage uptime if you prioritise using Judgment. This basically makes Judgment the same as Colossus Smash for arms warriors. So much for class fantasy. Now, via talents, you have a choice of 3 types of Crusader Strike and Blade of Justice. For Crusader Strike, you can choose the standard version, a weaker version but with 3 charges, or a weaker still version with 2 charges but it cleaves onto an additional target. Now, on the face of it, there isn't a realistic scenario where you'd want to take the first one. The second one is good with the 3 charges because you can fill out any dime time, and you can build up holy power quickly during key burst phases or at the start of a fight. The final one cleaves onto another target called Zeal, should be most useful in AoE or 2 target cleave scenarios. However, this third one, Zeal, has an additional benefit. Using it gives you a haste buff which can stack up to 3 times. As long as you use Zeal frequently, this can add up to a very nice amount of haste and allow for a higher uptime on the Judgment debuff, or percentage uptime. At the moment it allows for 20% haste per stack, so 60% altogether. But in addition, the haste is multiplicative. That means it actually returns more than 60% haste as long as you have some haste on your gear. Currently in my quest gear, which has a lot of haste on it, I am getting 100% haste, from 25% haste on gear to 100% haste altogether. Now, that basically would mean you'd have no downtime on the Judgment debuff if you use Judgment off cooldown as top priority. But I imagine that will be changed at some point. Still, the fact that Zeal gives a haste buff at all, which can be used to get out of the all-important Judgment debuff wearing off, means that we will take Zeal in all situations. Never mind that it does significantly less damage on a single target, we more than make up for it with the haste we get, even if those current haste values are slashed. This means that the other 2 options for Crusader Strike are currently pointless, as they will never be taken. Now, in order to correct this, Blizzard have 3 choices. They could either make the haste buff baseline for all forms of Crusader Strike, they could remove the other 2 talents as dead wood, or they could remove the haste buff from Zeal completely. Now, quite which one they will go with, only time will tell. For Blade of Justice, we have an option that buffs the standard version, another that does much less damage but holy damage instead of physical, and with a reduced cooldown, and a third option that does ticking AoE damage every 2 seconds. The first one is a good option for single target, with the third one not having its, or the second one I should say, sorry, not having its cooldown reduced by haste for some reason. The final choice is actually much better than it looks. As I noted in part 3b, Divine Hammer still has a 20% chance to proc Conviction. This means that even in single target, you will gain far more procs than in any other form of the ability. And in an AoE situation, it's likely that you will end up wasting so many of them that you will almost never run out of them. Now, I imagine this will be changed at some point before launch as well. In terms of holy power spenders, we have the usual suspects of Templar's Verdict and Divine Storm. Templar's Verdict now does holy damage as standard. We have a talent to buff its damage, which is called Final Verdict, in a single target situation. Currently, Divine Storm is not a DPS increase unless there's at least 3 mobs, but numbers are far from tuned. In addition, we have a number of other holy power spenders. Holy Wrath. Unlike the version in live, this only does damage to our target, it's not AoE. It's also channeled and so affected by pushback if you're being attacked. However, if you don't get it pushed back, it does do a good amount of damage with 50% extra on stunned mobs. It also returns healing to you equal to its damage. However, I can't see any real raid use for it, but it might be useful in challenge modes dungeons possibly, I don't know. However, it does share a talent row with the next one, which is Seal of Light. Now, this is an Inquisition type buff. It buffs our haste and movement speed. It lasts 45 seconds. Currently, we don't really need the haste because of the insane amount of haste we get from Zeal. However, when Zeal is toned down, we might find that Seal of Light is obligatory in raids and maybe all PvE scenarios, especially as our movement speed options are severely limited, but I'll go over those later. Now, in the same talent row, we have one final, which is also a spender, Word of Glory. Now, much like now, Word of Glory does healing for 3 holy power, but this one heals up to 6 injured allies for a modest amount. However, I can't see it really seeing service now that the number of beneficiaries has been capped. It used to heal all allies within a certain range. Now it's limited to 6. Doesn't do a huge amount of healing either. There is another holy power spender in a different talent row, and this is Execution Sentence. This has a 20-second cooldown and does a lot of damage. Unlike in live, it doesn't tick for an increasing amount of damage each second. It just comes down for 10 seconds as normal and then does all of its damage in that final tick. Now, when that lands, we need to make sure that the Judgment debuff is up. We don't necessarily need the Judgment debuff to be up as we use the ability. And we also need as many other DPS increasing options up as possible, whenever possible. It does do a massive amount of damage and needs to be used off cooldown as a priority. Other options for damage include the following. We've got Consecration. This does what it does on live for protection, so we get it as ret. It's an AoE that ticks and does damage to all mobs within its area. We can't move it around with us, so it will just be the area where we drop it. It's affected by haste, does holy damage. Very sensible for any fight where you're going to have multiple mobs at your feet for most of the fight. However, in a situation where single target damage is key, or if the mobs are not around for that long, then you wouldn't take this over Execution Sentence. Shield of Vengeance. This is a useful little absorb shield, really. It's really a defensive, but has a 2-minute cooldown. And if the shield is completely absorbed during its duration, which is about 15 seconds, then after the timer ends, it deals out holy damage equal to the amount of damage that was absorbed to your target. Now, I'm not particularly keen on that feature because it's not like Death Knight's anti-magic shell where they can use it and they know they're going to get some DPS gain out of it as long as they're taking damage, spell damage in their case. Obviously they know the more damage they take, the more benefit they will get, but they will get some benefit as long as they take some damage. This is not the case with Shield of Vengeance. We either take all the damage or we get no damage from it at all. This is quite dangerous because it is going to encourage us in certain situations to take more damage than we really need to. There is another ability called Equality. This has a 2-minute cooldown. It's a talent, and it does damage to our target. Well, in fact, it does damage to all mobs in 10 yards in fact, equal to our lost health. Now, it's another ability that has us dicing with death, isn't it? Because of course it will work most effectively when we are close to death. We could, in fact, in a group situation with lots of mobs around us, we could do a stunning amount of damage. Stunning amount. However, it can't be used while forbearance is up. So we can't just get ourselves down to low health, put shield on, and then use it safely. What we can do is get ourselves down to low health, use it very quickly, and then immediately use lay on hands or bubble. But again, dicing with death. But the good news is I don't think I'll have to worry about it because I would never take it. It shares a talent row, first of all with Final Verdict, which buffs our Templar's Verdict in a single target fight, and Mass Judgment. This causes the damage and debuff from Judgment to spread to all nearby mobs. It also increases the damage of Judgment by 50%. This is the obvious choice for AoE or cleave fights. Another ability that does damage is Wake of Ashes. This is an ability we get from our artifact. All artifacts have a special ability that you can put on your action bars, and this is ours. It does AoE damage where you place it and generates 5 holy power as long as it does some damage to something. So it's best used when we have no holy power at all, so we don't waste it. Now, it can be used on the pull to build up holy power quickly. We could then potentially pop Seal of Light, spam Zeal a few times to get our haste up, and then go into burst mode. However, there are a few options for openers, and until we see finalised numbers, it may not be entirely clear at this point which is best. For example, it is currently possible to build up holy power outside of combat with Divine Hammer. We can use this as we're waiting to pull a boss, build up your 5 holy power, say use Seal of Light, put Seal of Light on yourself, change the talent because you're still out of combat to whatever talent you want after you've built up a bit more holy power, and then launch into the boss, maybe having lost 1. Maybe it's still got 4 holy power at least, and you're straight into being able to use Execution, Sentence and Judgment and all the rest of it. Now, they don't cover all of our damage options there. There is one more, but the other one comes from Greater Blessing of Might. And I have discussed the problem of Greater Blessings in an earlier video. And as the situation remains much the same, I don't really feel the need to add anything here. So you could go and watch that video if you haven't already. The only other thing I could add now is that no top Retribution Paladins are happy at all with the Greater Blessings, but Blizzard refused to budge on it. It seems that they are willing to listen to feedback regarding tweaks to abilities already in, but not to anything that is mechanically wrong, fundamentally wrong with the playstyle. They just seem to hide behind their favourite phrase, class fantasy. Now, after damage, we can look at mobility. Very, very important in PvE, very important on raid boss fights. In terms of mobility, we have a 20% movement increase if we take and maintain Seal of Light, and another talent that gives us a 100% speed increase for 4 seconds on a 1-minute cooldown. Now that is likely to be all but useless in most raid encounters. Yes, it can be pointed out that Death Knights have even worse problems in that regard because they have no movement speed increases at time. But I could also note that many melee have rather good movement options, as you would expect. Now in terms of defensives and healing, we have Flash of Light, which can be buffed with a talent that will never be used though, as it competes with our piss poor but better than nothing movement boost. It also competes with Divine Intervention. This is a cheat death ability that only works if Divine Shield is available and we don't have Forbearance. However, it does passively halve the cooldown of our Divine Shield, so good for dangerous fights that don't require sudden movement. We have Word of Glory, which I've already discussed and discounted as a serious option. We have Hand of Light, which is actually a rather nice ability. It's baseline. We place it on an enemy, and any attacks that they receive, even if they're not from us, heal us for 3% of our maximum health. Only 1 heal per second is allowed. It lasts for 10 seconds. If the mob dies within that time, we get a 40% bonus heal. It's baseline, as I say, and good in all sorts of scenarios. Shield of Vengeance, I've already mentioned, or Absorb Shield. Nice little defensive. quite a long cooldown at 10 minutes compared to similar abilities for other classes, I feel. But it is a nice little cooldown to use. Divine Shield no longer reduces our damage, so we can use it without worrying about a DPS loss. However, the hefty 5-minute cooldown, which remains unless we take Divine Intervention, does make it an ability of last resort now. And in regard to that, it's quite similar to our other last resort ability, Lay on Hands. This does what it does now, still with the 10-minute cooldown, but that can't be reduced by anything. It is always going to be a 10-minute cooldown. So one trick pony on any fight. Blessing of Protection still makes you immune to physical damage as it does on live, but you are not prevented from attacking within it. So you could even put this on a melee character or a hunter or even a tank and they'll still be able to attack. Has a 5-minute cooldown as now. It can be reduced slightly by a trait on our Ashbringer, but it is only very slightly reduced. It is still likely to be used only once per boss on anything other than the longest encounters. And really, that brings me on to utility. Now, in terms of utility, essentially, we have none. Given that Blizzard suggested that some of our damage abilities were utility at the same point in WOD testing, does make me wonder what utility they think we have, but we actually have none. Blessing of Freedom has no boss application. Blessing of Protection is niche at best and will see no serious use in at least 90% of all boss fights, so that's not going to get us a raid spot. The heal from Word of Glory will be laughable in a raid setting, and Divine Intervention may see one fight in the entire expansion if WOD is anything to go by. We can't even taunt anymore, so off-tanking is a thing of the past. Not that it was used that often anyway. We do get Cleanse back though. It was removed for most of Alpha, but we've had that back. So bring on the poisons and diseases. Finally, Hand of Hindrance is used to slow down an enemy by 70% for 10 seconds. This has potential use on the face of it, but in reality there are classes who can snare whole packs of mobs at once, so the chance of that button getting much use is pretty close to zero. In terms of crowd control, we've got similar options to now. Fist of Justice doesn't reduce the cooldown of our stun by half anymore, but it does reduce it by 10 seconds every time we use a Holy Power Spender. Now, in combat situations, this can be just as good, or maybe even slightly better. The only problem is it is a bit awkward not being able to watch the timer of the ability getting ready for use because it jumps by 10 seconds each time you use that ability. Repentance is similar to now, but does damage to the mob. It does up to 25% of the mob's health if it's on that mob for a minute. And Blinding Light is as blindingly useless as it is in live. And then the final talent choice is Eye for an Eye. This gives us a flat 35% physical damage reduction for 10 seconds and causes holy damage to be directed onto enemies that melee attack us in this time. It has a 1-minute cooldown and you listen to it and you think to yourself, that sounds good for PvP. Yes, because that's the only time it would be ever seen, because you will never use it in PvE because it competes with Execution Sentence and Consecration. And there is no scenario where you would not want to take either Execution Sentence or Consecration. So we will not use Eye for an Eye in PvE. Now, those are the abilities. Now, in terms of general gameplay, there is actually much that is enjoyable. It sounds like a bit of a downer, and it is. It is quite enjoyable, but it's a lot of work for moderate gains. Now, where have we come across that before? We are shaping up for a tier that will yield 2-button spam monkeys who sit pretty at the top of damage meters and talk shit about those having to play with a much higher degree of skill just to be able to choke in their dust. We have a lot of buffs to track, which will be fine for serious players once we get access to our add-ons, but a complete nightmare for anyone who uses the standard Blizzard UI, which of course is the majority of players. In addition, those buffs are difficult to keep up, and that's for anyone, whether you're good at tracking them or not. If we cannot move quickly from mob to mob, we are not going to be able to, for example, maintain our stacks of zeal for the haste buff. With our mastery potentially creating a situation where the damage of almost all of our ability doubles during the debuff window, that means we're going to have to be very sharp with the timing of abilities. Also, with the massive amount of haste we're getting now, and even if it's slashed, we're still going to have very good haste, the way things are working out. It means every second we're not doing damage, we are losing so much damage. That's no different to now in live, except in live we have movement options. In Legion, we really don't. Although it's better than nothing, it's better than the state Death Knights are currently in, it's not acceptable. When it comes to muscle memory, Blade of Justice can be an awkward one. The main form generates 2 holy power, so you can get used to using it and thinking, okay, I use this and I've got 2 holy power more than I had before. But the other forms generate 1. Now that's not a problem mechanically. In terms of the numbers, that can absolutely be balanced, no problem at all. However, let's say you're used to the form of Blade of Justice that only generates 1 holy power, and then you use the version that generates 2. Well, you might use it accidentally while you've got 4 holy power. You can't have more than 5, so you've wasted 1. The opposite can be true. Maybe you're used to it generating 2 holy power, and then you switch to the version where it only generates 1 every now and then, and you get a situation where you've got 1 holy power, you use this ability thinking it gives you 2, you try and use a spender, can't use the spender because you've actually only got 2 holy power now. So you won't build up any real muscle memory with these abilities. You are going to be very reliant on being able to track holy power and react to it rather than proact, which is a worry for me. I mean, frankly, the spec is a bit of a mess for casual players, top players, and everyone in between. I will caution against blind panic, and there is one thing that comforts me. Blizzard have been throwing out weekly builds with major changes for the spec and other specs. This suggests that they are just trying out mad things and will eventually settle on something sensible. The fact that they are bringing these things out every week, this is not usual during a testing thing. So it means that they haven't settled yet. Hopefully they will settle on something sensible in line with the wishes of their reasonable customers, both top end and more casual. I do have faith. It's not faith derived from experience, I have to say, but I do have faith. So that's the breakdown of where we currently are in alpha, and yet again I will just point out this is a long way from launch, many changes potentially to come. Sorry it's been a bit of a downer, but we do have a number of problems at the moment in terms of the gameplay and just a few little... I mean, it's the sort of thing that I think could easily be sorted. Like, easily be sorted. But everyone says that, don't they? But until the next update, maybe it'll be as soon as next week, who knows. I'll see you later, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and check out my other videos if you like this one. If you didn't like it, do comment and say why not. See you later.